All right, so welcome. My name is Ben King, and I want to thank you for checking out this class on practicing mindfulness. Little bit of my story, my background. I've spent the last 20 years in my career fascinated and focusing on human performance. And I started out as a young athlete and grew into a passionate personal trainer, keeping the first half of my career mostly in the umbrella of fitness. But about 10 or 12 years ago, I started meditating. And I started meditating as a way of dealing with my own anger, my own attention deficit, and the many life challenges that I faced or was facing and still face, that we all face. And it changed my life. It changed my life, and of course, for the better, it still continues to do so. So it's an honor and a privilege to do this practice with you, to share some of these practices with you. Sorry about the glare I'm noticing. And so let's review a little bit of what we did last week. If you haven't had a chance to check out that video on diaphragmatic breathing, I encourage you to do so, because it really laid the foundation. But we're going to do a quick review of that, and then we're going to build on that practice. So last week we talked about first just becoming present to and becoming aware of your natural breathing rhythm. How do you normally breathe? And how would you breathe in any given situation? Like, for example, when you're stressed, how do you become present to the way that you're breathing? And also when you're in a state of joy, when you're in a state of peace, right? Noticing what's happening in the breath as a way of beginning your mindfulness journey. That's where we want to encourage you to start, is just by noticing what's happening naturally. Now, as we talked about last week, you might notice that as you begin to notice your breathing, it naturally sort of changes. And we want to allow for that natural shift to happen, because when we really try to forcefully shift some things, as we'll talk a little bit more, what we resist persists. So when we try to change things with force, sometimes the thing we're trying to change sort of meets us with the same amount of force that we're trying to change. So let's take a moment and just review this natural breathing process that you're in right now. So take a moment. Allow your eyes to close if it's safe. And begin to just notice your breathing. Notice where you feel it show up on the inside of your body. Notice what muscle or what muscles you're using to bring air in. Notice what it's like to breathe in through your nose or your mouth, whatever you're doing naturally. Whatever is most autonomous. It's okay if it shifts, but allow for a little bit of space for it to shift on its own. And when you're ready, go ahead and allow your eyes to softly open and come on back into the conversation. So just noticing where you're breathing in. Is it going in through your nose? Do you notice it going in through your mouth? Is it short and shallow, or are you breathing with a little bit more length and depth? Noticing if you're breathing into the chest or into the belly, which is what we really were working on building and developing last week, was that ability to breathe down here in your belly, right? A lot of times when we're stressed or we're anxious, or often just in the busyness of life, we tend to breathe up top. And last week we really kind of broke down the anatomy and physiology of like why those neck muscles activate as a way of creating respiration. And so just learning how to shift that breathing to your belly can have a whole series of benefit. And then one of the things that we did last week is we started to dissect the box breathing. And so just a quick review, if you were to breathe in for 3 seconds, we wanted to encourage a 3-second pause and then 3 seconds patiently exhaling and then a 3-second pause, kind of like forms up this box. I also want to remind you that in those pauses, in those moments of pause between your inhalation and your exhalation, and between your exhalation and your inhalation, we want to hold the breath, but not in a way that closes off the airway. We want to pause in your breathing, but we just want to let the diaphragm hold its current position, whether you're at the top of your inhale or the bottom of your exhale. Because when you close off the airway, that sort of creates that fight or flight nervous system that we talked about, that sympathetic nervous system. So being able to really just tune into that. So why not take just maybe 60 seconds to practice that box breathing? So if it's safe, go ahead and close your eyes. Sit up nice and tall. And imagine that box. You can choose 3 seconds or 4, whatever is most suitable for you as you breathe in. And then pause. And then breathe out. And then pause. And in. Gently pause. And out. Gently pause. Counting the number of seconds it takes to breathe in. Counting the pause. Counting the exhale. Take 2 or 3 more turns around the box. Feeling your respiratory pattern be at ease. And when you're ready, allow your eyes to softly open. And let's check back into the conversation. So box breathing, we also talked about turning that box into a circle rather than having kind of more defined transitions between inhalation, pause, exhalation, pause. To imagine that as being more circular, sort of can encourage the airway to be nice and soft, nice and relaxed. So let's talk about belly breathing really quick and some of the benefits. We talked last week, lead into deeper mindfulness practices, right? So if we can get really good at that belly breathing, that will help build upon your ability to benefit from other practices, as we would see that belly breathing as such a foundational piece of shifting your state, right? Calming your body, being able to change your hormones from being more stressful to being more at ease, lowering blood pressure and heart rate, and also training our ability to focus and creating better self-awareness. So today's progression from all of that is into developing more sensational awareness, more awareness of our body, our sensations, our posture. Obviously, breath is the big piece that's kind of leading us into that awareness. But the reason we would want to build on this awareness is because it's like the breath. Our ability to sense and feel is almost always there. right? We can tune it out sometimes, but it's still accessible on some level, right? If somebody talks about um, a numbness, right? There's an acknowledgement of a sensation, right? It might not be the same as feeling tension, but we want to build our ability to do that. So it's also a big part of our outlook. And this is big. We often discount or disregard how being able to feel our body or recognizing how our body contributes to our experiences, it contributes to our outlook on life. This is also referred to as like our worldview, right? Our perspective towards others, and how our body is contributing to our interpretations, right? Our perspective towards others, as we said. So as we become more and more familiar with how our body is participating in our experiences, we can start to notice how that's being shaped, how that's shaping those experiences. So we want to develop this skill to observe our sensations at any given moment. And we then open up space for more mindfulness, more mindful choices. So I'm reminded of one of my favorite teachers that I've had, Richard Strozzi Heckler. He's the founder of the Strozzi Institute, who we're pulling our centering practice that we're going to do in a little bit from. One of Richard's quotes that I love is, he said, when we become open to and live in our body, whether through pain or joy, a whole new universe of alternatives becomes available. I really love what he's saying here, because it helps us to grasp that our body is so intelligent and it naturally wants to participate. And when we become present to that, what he means by saying a whole new universe of alternatives becomes available is that we're going to start to operate with less default and autonomy and more choice. For example, you might notice that when you're angry, when you're frustrated, there are certain things that show up in your body, certain things that kind of associate with your experience, right? For a lot of people, when they're angry, there's a wrinkling of the face, right? Or a crunching, sometimes in the eyes or the band around the forehead. Oftentimes you'll see people clench their jaw, or their lips may tighten up. And so you want to become present to this, right? Because if you become open to and live into your body, what then happens, what he means by a whole new choice of alternatives shows up, is that you may decide that you don't want to express anger. You may decide that while it serves in some capacity, it might be costing you more than it is serving you. So you might say, gosh, I don't want to respond to my coworkers or my family in that way. I want to be able to kind of get my stuff together and then choose my words and then choose my actions, right? So by practicing being in your body, you then start to recognize, oh, I'm having one of those moments. And rather than operating on default, where we often might have some regret, we now get to choose and say, no, actually, who I want to be in this moment is this person. So you can approach challenge more grounded, right? You can approach challenging situations or stressful situations operating out of more choice. And that's where our growth lies, right? On the other side of that coin, right, it might mean that when you're being bold or courageous, right, you might notice that you're able to stand a little bit taller. Or you might notice that when you're being when you're in the presence of loved ones, you feel more at peace, and you feel it kind of in the ease of your muscles. You know, it can be anything, right? But being able to align yourself with what matters most to you, align yourself, your words and actions with who you really want to be. Because we all have these struggles, these places where we know we have room for improvement, room for growth. And if you're watching this, I know that you're already dedicated. You're already dedicated to your growth and transformation. So let's do a exercise. I want you to get 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 some feeling and sensation around what we resist persists. That's a quote from Carl Jung. That's the abbreviated quote from the psychologist Carl Jung. And the actual quote, or the longer version of the quote, it's only a little bit longer, says, "What we resist not only persists, but grows in size." So let's talk about let's talk briefly about attention, and then we'll get into this practice. A lot of us want to be able to focus more, right? And so sometimes we notice our attention going in different directions, and we have this inability or lacking a skill to really focus on at times that we want to. And so we get frustrated, right? And we get, I wish I could just focus. We might label it attention deficit, like I do for myself, and we kind of resist this thing, but it continues to change. So I want you to do this practice with me. Make a fist, make a nice fist, and I want you to hold this fist nice and tight. I'm holding mine in my right hand, so I'm going to refer to my right and left. So maybe if you take your right hand and make that fist, and I want you to hold it nice and tight. I want you to take your left hand, and I sort of want you to notice what happens in your body when you're trying to pry this open, right? Try to, squeeze some fingers in there, try to open up like you're trying to pry. And just notice what happens in your body as you're doing that. Maybe you do this with your eyes closed. Open is fine too, but just kind of notice what happens as you're trying with your left hand to open up this fist. Notice your breathing as you're working with this fist. And now let's take a moment and let that go. So we all have our own conditioned tendencies. We all respond differently. There are things that happen, generally speaking, when we do that, when we're holding this tight fist. This fist naturally wants to be held tight. So you might notice that, just kind of like Carl Jung's quote, "What we resist persists." This hand sort of wants to stay there, and a lot of people tend to feel the tension show up. I mean, we're holding the fist tight, but we notice it show up in tension through the rest of the torso. And so when we're forcing change, it naturally wants to resist. Now, let's do another exercise really quick. This is part of the same one, but take that fist, make it nice and tight, just like you started in the other way. And then take this left hand. I want you to come right up underneath it. Close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that your left hand is telling your right fist that it is accepted. You accept the fist. Tension or relaxed, whatever it is. Allow the left hand to communicate to the right hand. Acceptance, embrace. And when you're ready, go ahead and let that go. You see, when we embrace and we accept, there's a natural shift. For a lot of people, when they do that, they notice that the fist just naturally has kind of a softening sensation to it. And that softening sensation can show up not necessarily everywhere else, but certainly has the potential to show up in a lot of other places. So take a moment and reflect on that and see if there's any learning available for you. How does that apply to you personally? Where in your life are you resisting change? Kind of in that sort of stubborn sort of way that a lot of us have in our personality traits or characteristics. Notice if there's any areas in your life that might benefit from acceptance and support. Right. So I'm going to build into what's next. That hand exercise, as well as this centering exercise that we're getting ready to do, comes from my learning that was done at the Strozzi Institute, the School for Embodied Leadership. And we want to, like I say, begin to really, really see how our body is participating, right? And so we want to get really clear on what it feels like to be centered, to be grounded. And I love this practice that they have. It's a centering practice that really intends to have us being more present, more open, and more connected by looking at our length, which will be our top to bottom, our width from left to right, and our depth from front to back. So when we talked about those things we might notice in certain times in life when we're angry, or if you're feeling scared, for example, you might notice that when you're scared, you've sort of lost some of your height, right? You might find that you're standing just a little bit shorter. Now this can be anything, but we just want to start to become aware of, like, how do these emotions that you have that you might not prefer show up in your body? And the centering practice from the Strozzi Institute really gives us this awesome opportunity to make it more physical, to recognize what's happening in our posture, and not forcefully shifting, but just noticing where you're at in your length. Now I'm gonna, as I work through this practice, I'm gonna encourage certain things that might feel like shift, but I want you to allow for the practice to be easy, right? One of the speed bumps that you might have in practicing centering or practicing a sensational mindfulness practice is that you might, I'm going to sneeze here for a moment, so let's see if I can mute in time. Of course, I'm on the spot. I couldn't do it. Thought I was going to sneeze. Yeah, sometimes we meditate and we don't recognize that we might be meditating with tension, right? In the neck or in the back, or we might be meditating with less than optimal posture. And it doesn't mean you have to, like, really train yourself to meditate in perfect posture either, because if you're going too far away from your normal baseline, that might be too much work, right? And you can start to go down this unhealthy path of criticizing posture. You know, what would it look like to just improve your posture a little bit? You know, like, what if we said, all right, we're going to try to meditate with good posture, but baby steps from where you are now and moving in the direction of improving posture, right? I've been studying the human body, posture, human performance for 20 years, and I'm still improving my own posture. So it's a never-ending game, right? We're always trying to improve upon this. So let's center together, shall we? This will be our extended practice for the session. So to get set up for this, I'm going to invite you to do this practice standing. Although if it's more comfortable to do seated, you certainly can. I will address both postures as we go through this. But I learned this practice from the Strozzi Institute, primarily from a standing position. But the the carry away, or the takeaway, the thing I want you to carry out of this is that you want to be able to build your skill of centering anywhere at any time in any position. And centering doesn't mean standing up straight, opening up to the sides, and making sure you're not leaning forward or backward. It could mean just being aware of where you're at. Just being aware of where you're at in those three dimensions. I also want to take a moment, or give you a moment here, to think about what is the thing that you're working on in yourself. What's the thing that you're focusing your attention and transformation on? I love Wayne Dyer said, it's the soul's responsibility to evolve and grow. And when we're not tending to that responsibility, things start to show up in life, possibly have more negative experiences showing up. And I just love that. As it relates to my own life, I feel like when I haven't been focusing on some type of growth and transformation, life for me in those moments or chapters felt more challenging. Felt like I was facing more challenge than I was enjoying. So think about that thing that you're working on in yourself. It can be small. We want to really look at what are the baby steps you can take to your own growth. And that will be the fourth dimension of the centering practice. We can start with that, but we'll most certainly finish with that. But, you know, another way of getting there is saying, for the sake of what? For the sake of what would you choose to do this centering practice? And so let's begin. So I'll invite you to come to a standing position or seated. And we can practice with our eyes open. Oftentimes when we think of meditation or mindfulness practice, we allow the eyes to softly close. And in the centering practice, I want to help build a skill of being aware of my surroundings, being aware of the things I can see with my eyes, and also being aware of my posture, my sensations. This might be contraction. So I want to keep my eyes open for this practice. It's okay to do with your eyes closed, but I'm going to encourage eyes open. Allow your breath to move into the belly. And we'll start to move through certain things that you might want to think about and feel about as we move into our length. As we begin in this dimension of length, feel the ground beneath you. Feel what it's like to push your feet in towards the floor. If you're sitting down, feel what it's like to make contact with the chair or the couch. Whatever it is that you're sitting on, feel what's beneath you. Allow yourself to feel into gravity. Almost as a tree would continue to grow roots deeper and deeper into the soil. And at the same time we're settling down, we are also extending up. So as we're working with this length from top to bottom, try to create a little bit more space in between your spinal vertebra. Notice if you're able to make a little adjustment and push the top of your head just a little bit closer to the sky. And allow for a little bit of space to show up in your teeth. Allow your neck to soften as you extend up. And we're centering in our length and allowing for a sensation of dignity, integrity. Notice that as you extend up a little bit taller, you invite different emotion. Imagine what might be different for you if you were able to be more centered in your length. What might change in life as you stack your bones vertically and also allowing your muscles to be at ease. This would be centering in your length from top to bottom. I like to imagine a tree growing roots into the soil at the same time, growing upward, reaching for the sun, accepting the nourishment. Centering in length. And now we'll move into our width, allowing yourself to open up to the left and right while staying centered in our length. We allow our shoulders to fill out to the sides, almost as a way of filling out as wide as possible into your natural width. I like to imagine an opening of a book or an unfurling of a scroll to the sides. In this dimension, we can feel the sides of our legs, feel the width of your feet. And if you're standing, you're allowed to move. If you're seated, you might feel a little less movement, but it's okay. Just allow for a little bit of movement from left to right. And then allow yourself to sort of settle into center in width. And just notice the emotions that show up when you fill out to your left and right. Oftentimes, this can invite sensations and emotions of being more open, being more receptive. This dimension of width shows up in our relationships with one another, other humans, other animals, all living things, from the bugs, the creepy crawlers, the trees, the plants, the grasses. And as a way of centering deeper into our width, you might allow your arms to outreach slightly to the sides. Allow for those arms to be a symbol of connection to one another, living things. Open and receptive to ideas and opinions of others. Open and receptive to solutions or resolutions to the challenges you face. So we can settle into our center in width. And as we maintain center in our length and our width, we can move into the dimension of depth. And as you center in your depth, you want to be able to feel front and back. Notice if you're leaning forward or backward. Notice if you're feeling more in line with acceleration or defense. Might show up as a leaning forward. If you're leaning back, you might notice that you're avoiding or wanting to withdraw, move away. And so as we center in our depth, I invite you to maybe do a little bit of movement front to back. And you can sort of settle in when you find and feel center. As we center in our depth, we can appreciate what's in front of us and what's behind. Imagine your history behind you. Imagine how all of the challenges you faced show up in your back. Imagine all of your teachers and challengers in all of their forms. Imagine how they've contributed to your growth and development, your maturation as a human. Imagine feeling at your back all of the support from everyone you've ever encountered. Feel into your back as a way of paying homage to all of those that help support them to be in a position of supporting you. How they've built you and your strength and ability to stand tall, to be open and receptive, and to remember. And now allow yourself to feel into your front. We might feel into our front as a way of looking into the future, what lies ahead. And imagine that if you can be centered in your depth, you can not only bring with you all of your teachers' learnings and challenges, successes that you've overcome in the past, bringing that with you as you invite the future with patience, while still being able to be assertive, to take action. Continue to breathe into your belly as you feel that center. And now imagine something you're facing in the current moment. Imagine what it would be like to be able to face this with dignity while being open and receptive. And while being able to remember your history and with courage invite that challenge. And so we find center in our length and our width and our depth. And imagine where the intersection of these three planes is. It's just a few inches below the belly button, your center of gravity. Imagine this center point where all three of these planes intersect. And now feel your sensation as a starting point from this intersection, moving outward, up and down, left and right, front to back, 360 degrees, three-dimensionally. Imagine your energy, your aura, your presence and imagine your purpose, the declaration, a commitment that you're working on in life right now. And imagine being able to take this shape, to shift into this centered, grounded, settled, dignified, open and receptive, and connected to what matters posture, sensation. And when you're ready, bring your attention and awareness to your fingertips and your toes, your legs and your arms, your torso, your organs, your pelvis, your face. And let's bring attention and awareness back into conversation. So that's the centering practice. And when we center, we open up a whole new universe of alternatives. So take for a moment a situation. Take for a moment a stressful situation as a stimulus, we'll call it. And imagine that you're able to push pause on time and check in with your body. Notice that you're holding certain posture in those three dimensions. And right before you push play on time, you align yourself in your length, in your width, in your depth. And from that alignment, you take action on the words that you want to say, the behavior that you want to express. What would be different in your life? You can take that picture into all three dimensions. I love the quote from Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, if you don't know, look him up. He has some incredible work out there. He was a Holocaust survivor. He went on to be a psychologist and given that he endured an incredible amount of suffering, I'm really impressed by this, by a lot of the things that he taught. And he said that, one of my favorite quotes of his, he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our ability to choose our own response. And in our response lies our freedom and our growth. We don't have a pause button that we can push on time, but we do have an ability to pause within ourselves and choose how we want to take action. And the centering practice, while we did it in a more extended way, and the more you practice this over time, the easier and easier it's going to get in fractions of a second. Like if you're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off, and maybe your kids are in the back seat, you can pause and choose how you want to respond. Maybe in the past you might have saw that incident, as that person was doing something to you, right? And so we can shout out expletives, or we can pause and sort of go, how do I want to shape my response to this? Your kids are always watching. We are always growing and transforming. What if we chose a different avenue? What if we chose to say, gosh, that person really needs to be somewhere. I hope they get there safely. How does that feel in your body compared to expletives? See, I don't think most of us would often choose expletives over compassion and empathy. But when we take the time between stimulus and response to pause and say, how am I choosing? How am I choosing to move forward? That's where our freedom and our growth is. Right? Because I think we can all agree, or I hope we would all agree, that it's more beneficial in life to progress and evolve to being a more compassionate, understanding person. And it feels better. So I hope that you've enjoyed this practice. I hope that you'll take it into your lives. I hope that you'll let it contribute to your growth and transformation. You'll allow yourself to get a little taller. Who doesn't want to be a little bit taller? Or a little bit more open, and to be more assertive and patient at the same time as we approach life. So many thanks for joining me. I hope that your day is blessed, patient, and joyful. See you later.